Have you ever noticed how change rarely arrives with a loud declaration? It almost never feels like a grand event or a movie scene where everything suddenly shifts in a single cinematic second. There are no dramatic thunderclaps, no sudden spotlights illuminating your room, and no sweeping music to signal that everything is about to be different. More often than not, the moment you decide to turn your life in a new direction happens quietly. It happens on an ordinary Tuesday morning while you are staring at the bottom of your coffee mug, watching the steam fade into the air, or late on a Sunday night when the house is still. The rest of the world is asleep, and your mind finally drops its heavy defenses. It is that quiet, heavy, yet liberating realization that whispers from deep within, I cannot keep living this exact same day over and over again. It is the realization that comes when you are sitting in traffic on an ordinary afternoon, listening to the monotonous click of the turn signal, and you suddenly feel the sheer weight of how much energy you have spent simply going through the motions. You look at your reflection in the rearview mirror and realize that you have been operating on autopilot for months, maybe even years. You have been waking up, going through your morning routine, responding to notifications, and pleasing everyone around you while completely neglecting the person looking back at you in that mirror. If you are listening to this right now, chances are you are standing at one of those quiet, unnoticed crossroads. You might be exhausted from carrying expectations that were never yours to begin with, or simply tired of waiting for some distant, ideal future version of yourself to magically step in and take charge. We spend so much of our lives waiting for the right time, waiting for Monday, waiting for the first of the month, waiting for the new year, or waiting until we feel completely ready. But readiness is a myth we tell ourselves to stay safe in the familiar. Today is not just another block of 24 hours to survive, endure, or push through. Today is the only place where your choices actually live. Yesterday is a finished story, and tomorrow is a promise that hasn't arrived yet. The only moment where you have the power to pivot, to forgive yourself, to set a new boundary, or to rewrite your internal dialogue is right here, right now. It takes immense courage to acknowledge that the life you built or fell into doesn't fit who you are becoming anymore. It hurts to admit that you have outgrown certain habits, mindsets, or routines that once felt safe. But that discomfort you feel isn't a sign that you are failing. It is a sign that your heart is asking for room to grow. It is the gentle friction of your potential rubbing against your present reality. Before we take another step together into this journey, I want you to give yourself permission to exist fully in this moment. Take a slow, deep breath. Pause for just a second and let the rush of the day fall away. Leave an affirmation in the comments below. Today is mine, and I choose to step forward. Write it out, anchor it into your reality, and let this be the quiet line you draw between who you were yesterday and who you are choosing to become today. It is fascinating, and sometimes deeply heartbreaking, how attached we can become to routines that do not serve us. We often catch ourselves repeating habits simply because they are familiar, not because they bring us fulfillment, peace, or genuine joy. Think about how many times you have found yourself mindlessly scrolling through video feeds late at night, refreshing the same weather app 3 times in 5 minutes, or endlessly rearranging icons on your computer desktop just to avoid sitting with your own thoughts. We convince ourselves that we are just resting, taking a breather, or taking a moment to decompress. But deep down in our quietest moments, we know the truth. It is a subtle, comfortable form of hesitation. We choose the safety of predictable repetition over the scary, unknown potential of genuine change. We do this because the human mind craves predictability above almost everything else. Even a pattern that makes you feel stuck, heavy, or dissatisfied feels safer to your mind than stepping into the unknown. The unknown carries risk, but familiarity carries a false sense of security. When you wake up every morning and replay the exact same mental script, worrying about the same unfinished project on your desk, rereading old text messages to analyze what went wrong, or doubting your ability to learn something completely new, you are slowly training your mind to believe that yesterday is the absolute maximum boundary of what tomorrow can hold. You begin to believe that this feeling of quiet stagnation is just who you are, rather than just a habit you have been repeating. Consider how much emotional energy it takes to maintain a life that no longer fits you. Think about those moments when you sit down at your workspace, stare at a blank screen, and feel an overwhelming sense of fatigue before you have even typed a single word. That fatigue isn't always physical exhaustion. More often than not, it is the mental strain of holding on to old ways of operating while a deeper part of you is desperately crying out for a fresh start. You find yourself pacing back and forth in your room, opening and closing the same apps, or reorganizing a stack of papers that doesn't really matter. All because taking a real step forward feels like too much to ask of yourself. We stay in these heavy loops because they protect us from the temporary pain of trying and failing. If you don't step out of your comfort zone, you don't have to face the vulnerability of being a beginner again. You don't have to face the uncomfortable feeling of not knowing all the answers right away. So you cling to the familiar weight on your shoulders, even as it bends your posture and drains your spirit. You convince yourself that tomorrow will somehow be different, even while doing the exact same things you did today. But safety bought at the expense of your growth is not true safety. It is merely a slow compromise with your potential. It is a quiet agreement to settle for a smaller version of your life because it feels easier to manage. Breaking free from these heavy, familiar patterns doesn't require a violent tear from your past. It begins with the simple, emotional honesty of acknowledging that you are tired of wearing out paths that lead nowhere. It starts when you look at those tired habits with gentleness instead of anger, recognizing that while they served a purpose yesterday, they are far too small to hold the person you are choosing to become today. Why is it so deeply difficult to let go of old ways of thinking? Why do we linger in situations, painful mindsets, or self-doubts long after they have completely worn out their welcome? It is often because those old, heavy patterns offered us protection at some earlier point in our lives. At one time, keeping your head down, holding back your real opinion in a meeting, or automatically assuming the worst-case scenario was a necessary defense mechanism to protect your fragile heart from criticism, disappointment, or sudden rejection. You built those mental habits as a shield, brick by brick, because back then you needed a wall to feel safe. The quiet tragedy is that we so easily forget to lay down our shields when the battle has long since ended. We keep wearing heavy, suffocating armor into soft rooms where we are trying to build trust, genuine creativity, intimacy, and joy. Every time you catch yourself over-explaining a simple, personal choice, or second-guessing a decision you already pondered for hours in the silence of your room, you are seeing that old, protective armor at work. You are watching a past version of yourself try to defend against a ghost. Recognizing this is not a reason to be hard on yourself or to feel ashamed. It is simply an invitation to notice that the protective gear that kept you safe in your past may now be the very thing keeping you from moving freely into your future. Holding on to what hurts us also happens because painful things have a strange way of feeling familiar, and our minds often mistake familiarity for home. When you have carried self-doubt for years, feeling confident can actually feel terrifyingly uncomfortable. When you are used to chaos or constant emotional alertness, quiet peace can feel eerie, almost as if you are just waiting for the other shoe to drop. So, without even realizing it, we gravitate back toward the familiar ache. We reread old letters that make us sad. We replay past arguments in our heads, and we revisit old regrets, simply because we know how that story ends. We cling to these sharp edges because deep down, we are afraid of what will be left of us if we let them go. We ask ourselves quietly, if I stop defining myself by what broke me, who am I? But you are not the pain you survived. You are not the mistakes you made, nor are you the harsh words someone once said to you in anger. Those are just things that passed through your life, not the core of who you are. It takes profound emotional bravery to look at your pain and say, "Thank you for trying to keep me safe when I was younger, but I do not need you to protect me like this anymore." It means allowing yourself to step out from behind the heavy wall you built and risking the openness of a new day. You deserve to live without constantly guarding against yesterday. Letting go isn't about erasing your past or pretending it didn't hurt. It is about deciding that the pain of staying where you are has finally become greater than the fear of stepping into the unknown. When we look at the history of human behavior, thinkers across centuries have noted that our true evolution begins when we stop seeing our habits as permanent traits. We spend so much of our lives absorbing labels that were handed to us before we were even old enough to understand them. You might have been told early on that you were the quiet one, the sensitive one, the one who always messes up, or the one who has to hold everything together for everyone else. Over time, those casual labels stopped being things people said and turned into the very walls of your identity. You built a home inside those definitions, even when they cramped your spirit and made it impossible for you to breathe freely. Unlearning who you were means having the immense courage to look at those long-held labels and ask yourself, is this actually who I am? Or is this just who I learned to be to survive? It is the delicate process of peeling back the layers of expectations, old habits, and defensive reactions that you gathered along the way. The renowned psychologist Carl Jung reflected deeply on this internal dynamic, capturing the essence of self-definition when he observed, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." Notice how profound that distinction truly is. Jung did not deny that events happen to us, or that our personal history shapes our starting point. Rather, he emphasized that our true identity is not anchored in past events. It is anchored in our ongoing, daily choices. When you find the courage to unlearn who you were, you give yourself full, unconditional permission to release the heavy identity labels you have carried for years. Labels like, "I am just an anxious person," "I am terrible at staying consistent," or "I am not built for leadership." Those are not immutable facts written in stone. They are simply stories built on repetition. And when you change the story you tell yourself, you change the entire trajectory of your life. It can feel deeply disorienting to unlearn old ways of being. When you stop reacting to stress the way you used to, or when you stop automatically taking on the emotional weight of the people around you, there is a temporary void. You might feel a strange sensation of emptiness, as if you don't fully recognize yourself in the mirror anymore. But that emptiness isn't a loss. It is open space. It is the blank canvas you have finally cleared so that you can consciously choose how to respond, how to feel, and how to live. Unlearning is not about erasing your past or pretending that your history never existed. It is about honoring the version of you that got you through your hardest days, while gently acknowledging that you no longer need to live by their rules. It means standing at the edge of who you used to be and taking a soft, deliberate step toward the person you want to become. You are allowed to outgrow your old self. You are allowed to change your mind, redefine your boundaries, and start fresh today, regardless of how long you spent living the old story. Self-reflection can sometimes feel uncomfortable, even daunting, because we so easily turn it into self-criticism. We look back at last month, last year, or even just yesterday morning, notice where we fell short, and immediately begin judging our past performance. We re-examine our choices not with gentleness, but with a harsh, sharp lens, holding ourselves accountable in ways that feel punishing rather than helpful. But real healing and lasting change require curiosity, not harsh judgment. Imagine standing in front of a mirror on an ordinary morning. If you notice a small speck of dust on your jacket, you do not beat yourself up for it, nor do you decide that the jacket is ruined. You simply brush it away. Inward reflection works best when approached with that exact same level of practical calm. It is about looking at your inner world with soft eyes, seeing your mistakes, your delays, and your moments of weakness, not as flaws in your character, but simply as information. When you observe your habits without judging them, you gain immense clarity. You stop wasting precious energy on feeling guilty about where you are, and you start understanding how you got there. You start noticing the exact triggers that prompt you to step back or hesitate, like opening 20 browser tabs when a task feels intimidating, constantly adjusting the layout of a document instead of writing the actual ideas, or walking away from a project the second it starts to feel unfamiliar. Once you see these habits clearly, without feeling ashamed, you regain your power of choice. You realize that a bad afternoon does not mean a bad week, and a stalled start does not mean a failed goal. Looking inward without judgment means treating yourself like a person worthy of patience. Think about how you treat a close friend when they come to you overwhelmed, admitting that they lost their temper or let a deadline slip. You don't insult them or list all the times they've messed up in the past. You listen. You validate how tired they are, and you gently help them see a path forward. Yet, when it comes to our own minds, we rarely offer that same grace. We expect perfection from ourselves while granting empathy to everyone else. To change your life today, you have to break that cycle of internal cruelty. You have to learn to sit quietly with your own thoughts without rushing to defend or condemn them. When old doubts surface, instead of fighting them or getting angry at yourself for feeling insecure, simply acknowledge them. Say to yourself, I see that I am feeling afraid right now, and that is okay. It makes sense why this feels scary. When you replace judgment with understanding, the heavy knot in your chest begins to loosen. You give yourself room to breathe, to learn, and to stumble without feeling like you have lost your way. Today becomes a place where you can try again, with a clean slate and a softer heart. We so easily fall into the trap of believing that changing our life requires a massive, dramatic overhaul. We tell ourselves that to truly turn things around, we need to wake up tomorrow at 5 a.m, completely reinvent our daily schedule, rewrite every single habit overnight, and suddenly become a perfectly disciplined version of who we were yesterday. But those extreme, rigid shifts are rarely sustainable. They burn bright for a day or two, and then leave us feeling more exhausted and defeated when the inevitable slip-up happens. True, lasting transformation isn't built on grand, theatrical gestures. It is built on small, quiet choices repeated consistently in the ordinary moments of your day. Momentum does not begin with a giant leap off a cliff. It begins with actions so small they almost feel trivial, almost too simple to matter. It is deciding to pause for 3 slow, deep breaths before reacting to an irritating notification on your phone. It is choosing to close the 15 extra tabs open on your screen and focusing your attention on just one single paragraph for 10 quiet minutes. It is choosing to drink a cool glass of water and step outside for a brief walk down the block to feel the air on your face, instead of sitting on the couch replaying a past argument over and over in your head. These tiny acts might seem insignificant in the grand scheme of your goals, but emotionally, they carry immense weight. Every single time you make a conscious, gentle choice to align with your well-being, you send a powerful signal to your subconscious mind. You are proving to yourself that you are reliable. You are showing up for yourself in real time, in tiny increments that do not intimidate or overwhelm you. You begin to rebuild the quiet self-trust that was broken by months or years of abandoned promises. One small action at a time, that fragile trust strengthens until it becomes the solid foundation of an entirely new momentum. Think about how a heavy door opens. It doesn't move all at once. It responds to a steady, quiet pressure on the handle. Your life works the exact same way. When you feel completely paralyzed by the sheer size of the path ahead, stop looking at the top of the mountain. Stop trying to figure out how you will manage next month or even next week. Bring your full, compassionate focus back to right now. Ask yourself, what is the single, smallest, kindest thing I can do for my future self in the next 5 minutes? Maybe it is writing down one single task on a clean sheet of paper. Maybe it is stepping away from a screen to let your eyes rest in the quiet. Maybe it is simply forgiving yourself for a slow morning and deciding that the afternoon can still be peaceful. When you honor the beauty of small choices, you realize that you don't need a miracle to change your life today. You just need the quiet courage to take one tiny, micro step forward, and then another, trusting that those small ripples will eventually become the wave that carries you home. Consider the internal conversation that runs in your mind throughout the day, that quiet, persistent voice that narrates your every move, your every attempt, and your every setback. What is the true tone of that inner narrator? When something goes wrong, when a plan falls apart, or when you make an embarrassing mistake, does that voice instantly whisper, "Of course this happened. You always mess up"? Or does it pause, take a breath, and say, "This didn't go as planned. Let us figure out what to adjust"? The subtle shift in phrasing might seem small on the surface, but it completely changes your entire emotional state and your ability to bounce back. The stories we tell ourselves are not just harmless thoughts passing through our minds like clouds. They are the invisible scripts that dictate how much space we allow ourselves to take up in the world. When you tell yourself the story that you are bad at relationships, incapable of focus, or destined to fail, Your mind actively looks for evidence in your environment to prove that story right. Every minor mistake becomes a giant proof point, while every small success is brushed off as pure luck. You end up trapping yourself in a prison built entirely out of your own harsh narratives. Reframing your narrative is not about forced positivity, toxic optimism, or pretending that real pain and hard obstacles do not exist. It is not about looking at a genuinely difficult situation and pretending everything is wonderful. It is about demanding emotional accuracy and basic fairness from yourself. If you encounter a frustrating setback while trying to learn a new skill or build a new life, absolute harshness says, "I am incapable of doing this." But emotional accuracy says, "This is challenging right now because it is entirely new to me, and it is completely natural to feel frustrated while I am learning." When you adjust your internal narrative from an absolute, permanent sentence to a realistic, practical description, you instantly remove the heavy emotional burden that prevents you from taking the next step forward. You stop treating temporary moments of difficulty as permanent character flaws. You begin to see that a bad day is just 24 hours, not a reflection of your worth as a human being. Think about how much softer your life would feel if you spoke to yourself the way you speak to someone you love deeply. You would never tell a friend who failed an exam that they are completely hopeless and should give up forever. You would hold their hands, look them in the eyes, and remind them of how hard they tried, how much they have overcome before, and that this one moment does not define their future. You deserve that exact same tenderness from yourself. Today, every time you catch your inner critic running its old, harsh script, pause for a moment. Gently challenge that narrative. Replace the story of limitation with a story of growth, patience, and possibility. Remind yourself that you are not a finished product set in stone, but a living, evolving person who is allowed to learn, adapt, and rewrite their journey as they go. A major, deeply quiet obstacle to personal change is the hidden fear of how others will react when we finally start changing. We worry that if we set clearer boundaries, change our habits, say no to things that drain us, or pursue new goals, the people around us might feel uncomfortable, disappointed, or misunderstood. So we hesitate. We dim our own light, quiet our true voice, and seek subtle, constant signs of validation before stepping out. We spend our lives standing at the edge of our potential, waiting endlessly for someone else to give us official permission to evolve. Think about how much energy you have spent throughout your life reading the room, measuring other people's reactions, and adjusting your dreams to fit what feels safe or acceptable to them. You censor your true interests, delay your passion projects, or stay in quiet, unfulfilling patterns simply because you don't want to make waves. You trade your authenticity for a temporary feeling of acceptance, leaving yourself feeling hollow, invisible, and exhausted at the end of the day. Reflecting on this internal pull toward conformity Carl Jung highlighted the core requirement of human self-fulfillment when he wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Notice what he calls it, a privilege. Becoming who you truly are means accepting that not everyone will understand your new path, and that is entirely okay. Your personal journey of healing, growth, and self-discovery does not require a unanimous vote from everyone you know. People will always view your choices through the lens of their own experiences, their own fears, and their own limitations. When someone is confused or unsettled by your growth, it is rarely about you. It is usually a reflection of their own discomfort with change. When you stop asking for external permission to change your mind, your career direction, your daily habits, or your priorities, you reclaim a massive amount of energy that was previously drained by constant overthinking. You stop living as an actor, performing a script written by everyone else. You begin living from the inside out, guided by your own core values, your own peace, and your own internal compass rather than external expectations. It takes profound emotional bravery to let people misinterpret you while you heal. It means accepting that some people might prefer the older, quieter, more compliant version of you, but choosing your own truth anyway. You don't need to explain, justify, or defend your growth to anyone. You only need to answer to the quiet voice inside yourself that knows what you need to thrive. Today, give yourself the permission you have been waiting for from others. Step into your own life fully, unapologetically, and let your truth speak for itself. There is a unique, deeply quiet, and often disorienting period during any genuine process of growth where you have left behind who you used to be, but you have not yet fully arrived at who you are becoming. You are no longer the person who comfortably fits into old, unhealthy routines, yet the new path ahead still feels fresh, unfamiliar, and unseasoned. You are standing right in the middle, in that quiet, liminal space where the old house has been torn down, but the new foundation has not yet dried. This in-between space can feel terrifyingly uncertain. You may find that you no longer get the same dopamine hit from old distractions, mindless scrolling, or superficial conversations, yet you haven't fully built the new habits, relationships, or creative pursuits that bring deep fulfillment. It is a period of emotional weightlessness where you feel suspended between two lives. In this quiet void, it is so tempting to retreat back to your old, familiar habits simply because they feel comfortable, even if you know they were slowly draining your spirit. When you are in the middle of a major life shift, your mind naturally panics. It wants immediate proof that your effort is working. You look around at your life after a few days or weeks of trying to change your mindset, and you might ask yourself, why haven't things completely transformed yet? Why do I still feel anxious? Why isn't everything falling perfectly into place? When those heavy questions pull at your heart, remind yourself that emotional tension is not evidence of failure. It is the raw, undeniable evidence of growth. Think about how nature works. A seed buried in the dark earth does not break open overnight, and transform into a full tree by the next morning. It spends time in the dark, pushing against the heavy dirt in complete silence, changing form long before anyone above the surface sees a single green leaf. A new way of thinking takes time to settle into your nervous system and become your natural, default way of existing. Embrace this middle space with profonde sound patience. Stop rushing through the chapters of your life just to get to the ending. The space between yesterday and tomorrow is not wasted time. It is where your character is quietly built. It is where you prove to yourself that you can sit with uncertainty without reaching for old, numbing mechanisms. It is where you learn to trust your own resilience when the road ahead is foggy and unclear. Treat yourself during this tender transition with the same gentle, unconditional encouragement you would offer a close friend who is courageously learning something new. If they stumbled, you wouldn't yell at them or tell them to give up. You would wrap your arms around them, help them brush off the dust, and remind them how far they've already walked. Every time you choose patience over panic, every time you choose to sit with the discomfort of growth, rather than running back to old habits, you anchor your new identity deeper into your daily reality. You don't need to have every single step figured out today. You don't need to see the entire horizon to know you are moving in the right direction. You only need to hold steady in this present moment, trusting that the bridge between who you were and who you are becoming is being built right under your feet with every gentle, conscious choice you make. As we bring our reflection to a gentle close, take a moment to look back over everything we have explored: the quiet decisions, the unlearning, the releasing of old protection, and the courage it takes to sit in the uncertain space of transition. Changing your life is not a distant, cinematic event waiting for perfect conditions to arrive. Perfect conditions do not exist. There will never be a Tuesday where your inbox is entirely empty, where every problem in your life is neatly resolved, where your energy is infinite, and where no one requires anything from you. There will always be unfinished tasks on your desk, unexpected interruptions in your schedule, lingering worries in the back of your mind, and moments of deep human uncertainty. If you wait for the world to quiet down before you claim your life, you will spend your entire life in the waiting room. Right now, within all of that background noise, lies the quiet, undeniable authority of this present day. Today is where your attention actually lives. It is where your breath enters your lungs, where your choices take physical form, and where your future is actively built, brick by tiny brick. Yesterday is a closed book, a memory fading into the background, and tomorrow remains a soft promise that has not yet arrived. You cannot act in yesterday, and you cannot make a decision in tomorrow. You can only live, choose, and heal right here in the boundary of this single, precious day. You do not need to rewrite your entire destiny by tonight. You do not need to solve every problem that keeps you awake, nor do you need to prove your worth to anyone who ever doubted you. You only need to make one small, conscious decision that aligns with the person you are choosing to become. Choose to speak to yourself with gentle respect when things go wrong. Choose to focus your precious energy on what you can influence right now, rather than exhausting your spirit over what you cannot control. Choose to lay down the heavy armor you built to survive your past, and trust that you are strong enough to meet this moment as you are. Think about how much of your life has been given away to old regrets, to pleasing others, or to waiting for a permission slip that was never going to come. Today is the day you take the pen back. Today is the day you decide that your peace matters, that your potential is worth nurturing, and that your life belongs to you. Take one slow, deep breath into your heart. Feel the solid ground beneath your feet. Let go of yesterday's lingering disappointments and tomorrow's subtle anxieties. Step forward into this day with calm confidence, knowing that every choice you make from this moment on is a vote for your freedom. Today is yours to claim, to shape, and to live fully. Step into it with clarity, purpose, and an open heart. If you have stayed present through every step of this journey, take a moment to acknowledge the commitment you just made to yourself. In a world that constantly demands your attention, your speed, and your noise, choosing to sit quietly with your own heart is a profound act of self-respect. You did not just listen to words or pass the time. You allowed yourself to look inward, to examine the heavy armor you have been carrying, and to imagine a life where you move with greater ease, self-compassion, and clarity. Transformation is rarely a sudden explosion that changes your entire reality in a single afternoon. More often, it is a quiet series of decisions, a collection of micro moments where you choose gentleness over judgment, action over hesitation, and present awareness over past regret. The sections we explored together were not meant to be a rigid blueprint or a list of impossible standards you must meet by tomorrow morning. They were simply gentle mirrors, reflecting back the strength, wisdom, and potential that have been sitting inside you all along. Think about where you were when you first began listening to this. Perhaps your shoulders were tight with the weight of an unfinished week. Perhaps your mind was racing through an endless list of worries, old conversations you wished you could rewrite, or future scenarios that haven't even happened yet. Notice how, as you allowed yourself to drop your defenses and breathe through each reflection, the tension began to shift. The world outside didn't suddenly become perfect or effortless, but your internal stance changed. You remembered that you are the author of your response, the steward of your attention, and the owner of your peace. As you prepare to step back into the flow of your daily routine, to step away from this quiet space and return to your work, your family, your responsibilities, and your ambitions, remember that you do not leave this insight behind. The clarity you felt during these moments does not belong to this recording. It belongs to you. It is a state of mind that you can return to whenever the noise of life threatens to overwhelm you. When you find yourself falling back into old, familiar patterns over the coming days, when you notice yourself endlessly scrolling to avoid a difficult task, second-guessing a decision you already made, or speaking to yourself with that harsh, critical inner voice, do not treat it as a failure. Retreating to what is familiar is a deeply human response to stress. Instead of meeting yourself with anger or disappointment, simply smile, take a slow breath, and recognize it for what it is: an old defense mechanism that you no longer need. Gently lay down the shield, reframe the narrative, and choose the small, kind action that honors your growth. You do not need to prove your evolution to anyone else. You do not need a grand declaration, an official permission slip, or a unanimous vote of approval from the people around you to live authentically. Your life is your own quiet masterpiece, built one ordinary choice at a time. Every time you speak to yourself with tenderness, every time you choose focus over distraction, and every time you step into the uncertain space of growth with patience, you are honoring the privilege of becoming who you truly are. This present day is yours. It is not a dress rehearsal for a future life, nor is it a shadow of your past mistakes. Today is where your breath lives, where your power resides, and where your story unfolds.